Well, Eddie, we're here in Puerto Rico this week, a massive fight Saturday night. But let's just take our mind back a couple of months. I mean, what a night for Liam Paro, defying all the odds against Subriel Matias.
I didn't think he'd win the fight. I'm not going to lie to you. I know how good he is, and I already saw him as one of the best 140-pounders in the world. But Matias was known as the bogeyman. Matias was known as really the uncrowned king of the 140-pound division. Plus, you've got to come to Puerto Rico in front of 8,000 people and dethrone him. What Liam Paro did was quite sensational. I don't think he's quite had the credit. He's definitely had the credit within boxing, because I've known that by how hard it is for him to land a big fight. But what he did was by far the greatest victory for an Australian fighter, certainly since George Kambosos beat Teofimo Lopez to become undisputed champion. And even then, you know, I think George had more of a shot in that fight than Liam did. So that was a massive, massive win. And I believe now, for a long time, people in boxing have known how good he is. You know, Devin, Shakur, you know, these guys have sparred him. They know he's a very, very good fighter. Now he's starting to get the credits and the plaudits that he deserves. And it continues this weekend, randomly, back in Puerto Rico, in a brilliant fight, 25-0 against 18-0. It's just another fantastic 140-pound matchup, and it's anybody's fight.
You mentioned randomly there. That's going to be my next question. We're still getting comments, even as far as yesterday. Why Puerto Rico?
Quite simple, really, when you start to explain it to people. Obviously, Liam Paro's from Australia. We looked at a big fight for Liam in Australia. Richardson Hitchins is from New York. We looked at the potential of doing it in America. It's kind of like he's the mandatory challenger, but to make this fight happen, we received an offer from our partners in Puerto Rico to do a World Championship event here. We received government funding. It was neutral ground. Obviously, Liam had been here before. We've got a huge amount of Puerto Rican talent on the undercard as well. It made money. It enabled both fighters to get the pay that they wanted for the fight. So we make it happen. You know, no one complains about home territory. No one complains about it's in New York, it's in his backyard, it's in this. So the numbers worked. I think that's the best way to describe it. And for Liam, he had no issue. The dream for him, of course, is the big Australian homecoming, which if he beats Richardson Hitchins, will be there. Especially now with George Kambosos teaming up with Matchroom, with Lou. And, you know, this is a big fight. And I said before in an interview, the winner of this fight will land a monster and will land a massive payday, because the mandatories are gone, right? They've got their defence. And you look at the 140-pound division, you know, whether it's Teofimo, whether it's Tank stepping up, whether it's Devin Haney, whether it's Ryan Garcia, whether it's George Kambosos, the winner of this fight will be in a position to change their life financially forever. And both guys are desperate for the win. It is a brilliant fight.
And Liam's made it clear he called the mandatory for that very reason.
You know, I've got to say, not a lot of people wanted to fight Richardson Hitchins either.
Yep. And
Liam's kind of gone now back to back with people that people would tend to avoid. Subriel Matias and Richardson Hitchins. And what he did, Liam, was after the Matias fight, he said, look, I want a big fight in Australia. We couldn't make that happen, mainly because of timings. But he said, let's get the mandatory out of the way. Right, you want to fight Richardson Hitchins? Yeah, let's deal with him. And then we'll do the big fight. So fair play, because he had the option for a voluntary defence and he had the option for a big fight. The big fight wasn't there in Australia just yet, but the voluntary was. And he said, no, let's deal with Hitchins and then we'll go on to the big fight. It's the right thing to do if you win. But this Parro kid's something a little bit special. You know, he's a Rottweiler. He has no fear, and the confidence that he would have gained through the Matias victory will put him in great stead. But Richie's good, talented kid. Honestly, a brilliant, brilliant World Championship matchup.
And two guys you both represent, so I guess it's a case of made a best man win.
I hate it because when we signed the job we've done with Richardson Hitchins has been sensational. He was with Mayweather Promotions. He was stuck in the wilderness. He was inactive. We got him active. We got him headlining, and now we've got him a shot for the world title. We've done our absolute job. For Liam Paro, we gave him a couple of big fights on big shows. We gave him a world title opportunity. Now he's defending for great money, and he's got a huge fight ahead of him if he wins. We've done our job for both guys. But I love to be there screaming and shouting, and I just can't when I've got both fighters. So at this point, I have to say 25-0, 18-0. Boys, the world is your oyster. Off you go, may the best man win.
We just spoke then about sort of Liam's options should he come through, potential Kambosos, Devin, Teo. But for Hitchins, there's a real chance to become the next superstar of American boxing, really.
Oh, for sure, and in a division that's red hot. Like, you look at the guys, I mean, he's had a lot of beef in the past with Haney and people like that, Devin Haney, Tank. Obviously, him and Shakur have been close over the years. But he's got massive fights ahead in America. And both fighters would bring big opportunities for Matchroom in terms of huge fights in Australia, or a big name in America. Hitchins, massive fights with other young American fighters, or the ability to land a huge fight on Riyadh season. So for both, it's massive, massive. And the winner is going to walk themselves into a monster.
Just to touch on a couple of fights in the undercard, spoke to Jaleel Hackett yesterday. I was quite surprised, maybe a little bit. He was already calling out Brian Norman. Is that realistic for next year, or maybe a touch soon?
Look, listen, I love what I'm seeing from Jaleel because he's so inexperienced. Called out Dobson in the last fight, dealt with him well. He's coming to Puerto Rico to fight a Puerto Rican on the undercard on Saturday. And now he wants to go in and fight for the World Championship. So let's get through Saturday. He did well against Brian Norman, been a bit inactive, and it was a big stage for him. So this is another incredible young American talent, and we have a whole roster of them. But it's all there for him. If he keeps winning, I'm sure the world title shot's going to come.
Great flyweight fight last week in Birmingham. Another star of that division this week, Yankel Rivera, who's not that too far away. You look at the world rankings, he's already sort of on the verge of a world title shot next year.
Oh, this is it. If he wins this fight, it's a world championship next. And, we've got a lot of great Puerto Rican talent on this card. I mean, LeBron against Diaz is a wonderful all Puerto Rican fight. It's going to be wild. But Yankel Rivera is a really, really fun talent in a red hot division. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Yankel fighting Galauya fight at some point as well. I think it's a great fight. A tough fight for him on Saturday night. And as always, he'll give us a war.
Mark Castro looks to go, I think, 14-0 this Saturday. Moved to lightweight now. Spoke to him yesterday. He said, I'm just growing. It's sort of man strength and whatnot. Next year's a big year for Mark.
He had to move up. Like, we see it behind closed doors. Like, him making super feather. It's brutal. And you're just not going to get the best out of him in terms of his power, in terms of his engine. And he's been depleted, in my opinion, at 130 pounds. Now at 135, I think, he's going to do much, much better. This is a tough fight. I think 20-2, the opponent, good fighter. But for Mark, going into 2025, it's all about the deep end. Once he goes to 14-0, 15-0, that's it. The stabilisers are coming off and we want top 15 guys. So Mark is always in fun fights.
You mentioned we've got a couple of local talents on display. Willito Ortiz, Stephanie Pinheiro. Could they potentially feature on an Edgar Berlanga card here next year? Yeah,
I mean, we do a lot of shows in Mexico because we love it. The vibrancy, the history, the mentality of Mexican fight fans. They understand boxing. They come out in their numbers. When we did with Subriel Matias here, it was incredible. Great atmosphere. One of my favourite nights, 8,000. Should have about 5,000 in there on Saturday. And we're looking and speaking to the government about bringing regular boxing to Puerto Rico. Now, if we can do that with Edgar Berlanga in a big homecoming, you're talking about a big, big show. I'm talking to Keith Connolly. March the 8th is the pencil date for that, potentially for Edgar Berlanga to have a big Puerto Rican homecoming. And this is going to be an important market for us. Any market where boxing is a stable part of the sports diet. And it's not just a stable part of the sports diet, it's steeped in history in Puerto Rico. This island has hardcore fight fans that understand and know the sport and come out in their numbers. So expect 3 to 4 events a year in Puerto Rico next year, probably kicking off with Berlanga in March.
Any names in the frame?
Not yet, no.
Earlier this week, huge news from Turki Al Sheikh dropping, probably the best card ever.
Yeah.
February 22nd. Let's just dissect that. Let's start with the top. Dmitry Bivol gets his immediate return against Artur Beterbiev. The only fight for both men, really.
Yeah. I've got to be honest, this card, it's a culmination of so much hard work from everybody involved, but from the vision and the budget, the purse strings of His Excellency. He's I'm relentless, right? This geezer is on another level. The phone calls, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., Zooms, for months on this card. And you got me, Frank Warren, and Spencer Brown, and George. And we're like this epicenter of madness all led by His Excellency. I mean, he says jump, I say how high. Don't mind admitting it. But look at what we're involved in. Look at what is happening to the world of boxing. I mean, I actually saw someone, on Twitter, starting a campaign about these fights not happening in America. Like, what? Like, fight fans, come on, wake up. What is happening in boxing right now is incredible. That card is one of the most, almost disgusting to a point, how good that card is. And we're looking at all these fights to get made, and we're making these fights, and he wanted to announce a week before. Like, you're closing off these fights, massive fights for guys, huge paydays. But go through the card. And obviously for Dimitri Bivol, before we talk about the other fights on the card, you never see a rematch happen that quickly. That was October, now it's February 22nd. We're getting an undisputed rematch for the fight of the year immediately. In a couple of weeks, we're getting a rematch for the heavyweight unified world championship fight between Usyk and Fury. Straight away. And the card, like top to bottom, we've never seen anything like this in boxing. And the response to this card has been amazing. And I know that, for anybody that doesn't know His Excellency, understand this, he loves his boxing. And he's over the moon with the response of the crowd, from the crowd of, this is the best we've ever seen.
What a mission from the card. Boots Ennis wasn't included against Virgil Ortiz. What can you tell us? What happened there?
Yeah, pretty straightforward, really. Boots had never made a decision to move to 154 officially. After his fights, you would have seen, maybe it's time. And when we received the official offer, it came at £147, which was interesting. I took that back to Boots, and then I asked them to confirm, and they said straight away, no, we've checked, it's at 154. I said, okay, look, let me speak to Boots and see if he's going to make the move. We probably had 2 or 3 days to make a final decision. And Boots said, I want to stay at 147, I want to unify. So it was never, it was definitely something we thought might happen. But once he said, I'm staying at 147 to unify, it was a non-starter. And, I know that fight fans really want to see that fight. And I think they will see that fight as well, by the way. But if we move to 54, I'll make something clear. We walk straight into that fight, no problem. But you're not going to see Boots now move to 154 in March or April. The decision is we're staying at 147 to unify. So I'm sure that fight will happen, but it won't happen on 22nd. What will happen is Virgil Ortiz against Israel Madrimov, which is just an incredible matchup.
Callum Smith sort of warmed up, should we say, last weekend in Birmingham, straight back into the massive fight against Joshua Buatsi. Winner of this presumably will get a world title shot next.
Yeah, it's for the WBO Interim Championship. Buatsi v Callum Smith, another domestic cracker. And again, this is like quite early on the card. They're talking about opening the card with Zile Zhang against Ajit Kabir.
I think every fight.
And then fight 2 is Buatsi against Kabir. It's madness. Brilliant fight. And that's again, like we've talked about these light heavyweight matchups for years, haven't we?
Yep.
Yard against Buatsi against Smith against, and all of a sudden, boom, we make it. Of course, it's the money, but who cares what it is? We've got it. And for Callum, I love the fight. And listen, it's a very tough fight for both, but it's a brilliant 50-50 matchup. Callum, that 5 rounds Callum had in Birmingham was going to put him in great stead. It was actually, wasn't a tough fight, but it was tough enough to get him geared up for a really important moment. And that's a 50-50 shootout. And I love it. I love that fight.
And Shakur Stevenson was obviously hoping for Zepeda. But the beef with Floyd Schofield's been bubbling up for a long time now.
Big respect to Floyd Schofield. I know you heard from Oscar de la Hoya who felt it was a bit early for him. I agree with Oscar. I think it is too early for him. But how good that you've got a young American fighter almost saying to his promoter, I really respect your opinion, give me the fight. Give me the fight. And by the way, obviously if he wins, the kid is a global superstar. If he doesn't and puts up a good fight, he's still a star. And he's getting a record payday for himself. Good luck to him. This whole mantra about, fighters getting beat, it's okay if it's strategic, if it's tactical. And it's better, and more than okay, if you believe you can win. And Floyd Schofield's given it the big one. His dad's given it the big one. Good, we need people like Floyd Schofield in boxing. Take on, in my opinion, in my opinion, potentially the pound-for-pound number one in Shakur Stevenson. 3-division world champion, 27 years of age. But coming off a hand operation. Maybe Kid Austin fancies it, and he obviously does, so good luck to him. Brilliant fight between two Americans, plenty of that, and a great addition to the card.
Next week, double fight week in association with Tasman fighters. Got Conor Wallace headlining. I mean, just speaking about the light heavyweight division there, Buatsi and Smith. Conor is very well positioned across, I think, all four of the governing bodies. If he wins this, he can start to look to maybe closing a world title shot himself next year.
Yeah, I mean, Conor's been moving quietly on the international scene, not quietly in Australia, but you know, they've been positioning. He had a big win against Pampelone on a no-limit card as the away fighter to take that number 2 spot with the IBF. He's right there. You know, should look good next week, headline again on DAZN, and he's going to land himself in a big fight. He could fight the winner of Buatsi against Callum Smith. He could fight Beterbiev. He could fight Bivol. I mean, we're going to have an Irish card on March 1st. Maybe he lands on that as well. So this is like the final smaller fight for Conor. Then he's going to be in the deep end, and he wants it. He's a good fighter, and he deserves that shot. He deserves that payday, and that's going to come if he wins in Brisbane next week.
And also on the card, Justice Hooney. I think it's fair to say maybe it's a bit of a stay busy kind of fight. Does that suggest there is already plans in place for next year?
Yeah, we've got, as we know, we've got January the 8th with Jai Opataya and Tasman Fighters and Spencer Brown in Brisbane on the Gold Coast. He'll be defending his world title. I expect Justice Hooney to feature on that card. And then we're going to bring another big show to Australia, end of February, early March time. That's going to be George Kambosos. That's going to be Sky Nicholson defending against Tiara Brown, and other big fights as well. Probably Justice on there, maybe Conor Wallace as well. You know, we've got by far the strongest stable in Australian boxing. We've got George Kambosos, we've got Jai Opataya, we've got Liam Paro, we've got Justice Hooney, we've got Sky Nicholson, we've got Conor Wallace.
And our new signing as well.
And we've got Tera Moana, who's going to be an unbelievable heavyweight. Our Australian stable is phenomenal. And I want to do more there. I want to do big shows. And Kambosos gives us the opportunity to do something a little bit bigger. So speaking to various states already about that February-March show. And of course, speaking to them about a potential Parro-Kambosos show a little bit later on if he comes through on Saturday. But Australia is important to us.
Let's stay with Tera Moana, whose heavyweight hope was obviously in the Olympics, boxed Jalavov. Makes his Matchroom debut next week in Monte Carlo. How quickly are you going to move him?
You are going to love Tera Moana, right? The guy is a full-out lunatic, right? He's performing his version, I think the Cook Islands version, I don't want to get it wrong territorially, of the Haka on ring walk or in the ring. He is an absolute unit who lives and breathes for a tear-up. He's technically very good. He punches like a mule. He's tough as they come. I'm telling you now, this kid is going to be a superstar. He's already 4-0, by the way, in the pros. If you watch his fight with Jalavov, he had a really good fight in the Olympics. He stuck it right on him, no fear. And you're going to love watching him. And his professional debut with us, after his 4-0, will come in Monaco next weekend on a great card. Fellow
Olympian Bia Ferreira makes her first defence of the world title as well, against a former European champion, I think. So come through this, unifications next year?
Yeah, I mean, on the card as a whole, obviously Akhmad Aliyev in a really important fight, because the reality is, I want to make one thing clear, Nair Inoue, pound for pound great, completely ducking Akhmad Aliyev. Completely ducking him. And people, the Twitter sphere will say, oh, as if he's been called to fight Akhmad Aliyev in his last two fights. Yeah. He chose TJ Dehenny and he chose Goodman. Two guys, with all due respect, that have absolutely no chance against Nair Inoue. He ducked the first mandatory to fight Dehenny. Then the WBO wrote to him and said, you have to fight Akhmad Aliyev. And he ducked him again to fight Goodman. That's the reality. And I know that he's the favourite against Akhmad Aliyev. But Akhmad Aliyev is the only fighter at 122, the only fighter that will give him any kind of action at all. And he's got a big fight in Monaco next week. And as you said, Beatrice Ferreira, who I think is one of the most exciting pound-for-pound fighters in women's boxing. Good fight against Bordesa, French European champion as well. Big fight for Chev Clark. Chance to add the European Championship to his British title as well. Great fight between Maxie Hughes and Gary Cully. And Monaco's always a bit special, and looking forward to getting out there next week.
Then we finished the year back in Saudi for the unified World Heavyweight Championship rematch between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. I know you've been changing your mind in the build-up. Where do you sort of sit at the minute?
I changed it again this morning, actually. I was in the gym and I was thinking about the fight. And, I spoke to Spencer Brown last night. Word out of the camp is positive. I'm going for Tyson Fury. I've got a funny feeling he's going to put something magical together on December 21st. I mean, obviously, it's a huge night for us as well. Madrimov against Bokacic, McGrail-McCann, my favourite fight of the year, in all honesty. Johnny Fisher against Dave Allen as well. Just an incredible night. But I've got a sneaky feeling for Tyson Fury. And obviously, a vested interest. And, we'll be there with AJ to witness it as well.
Yeah, he'll be watching very carefully. I mean, what's the latest on AJ? I think it was rumoured that he had an injury a couple of days ago.
Yeah, not really an injury. He's just got niggles. And that's why he couldn't fight on February 22nd against Dubois. I know everyone says duck in the ring. We'll go straight into the rematch. It's not a problem, but we just can't do it in February. So if we don't fight Tyson Fury, we'll fight Daniel Dubois 1,000,000% in May or June. But he's just not ready to fight in February. So he's not even now in training. He's still just getting a little bit of rehab and everything, but he'll begin camp early next year. He'll be in Riyadh. And look, if Tyson Fury beats Alexander Usyk, Tyson Fury can fight AJ for the unified World Heavyweight Championship. It'll be the biggest fight in the history of the sport. If he loses against Usyk, he can fight Anthony Joshua in one of the biggest fights in the history of the sport, but certainly the biggest fight in boxing right now. So from AJ's side, Dubois or Tyson Fury, or Joseph Parker. Don't count him out. But yeah, of course, listen, as a team, and become to quite like the guy, and listen, Spencer Brown's my mate, and I want Fury to win, not just for British boxing, but for him. And obviously if he does, we could see something very special.
Just finally, we know there's been talks of Barrios and Benn. Last 24 hours or so, Mr. Ben Shalom sort of stuck his oar in a little bit and spoke about Eubank. What's the latest on Conor's next move?
Conor just wants Barrios. He just wants to fight for the world welterweight title. The reality is he's going to make 3 times more money to fight Eubank. Is he bothered about that? Yeah. But he's sending me videos of his dad's WBC world title on his wall. And he's starting to realise the importance and the legacy of becoming WBC world champion. I'm not going to get... I spoke to Ben at length the other night on the phone, actually. I'm not going to get into the backs and forwards. The reality is this is a 50-50 fight. We're talking about 60-40 we got offered, 55-45. Stop with the bullshit. I've been around this game long enough to know it just don't work. And you can argue one's fought on pay-per-view. You can argue that Conor Benn's ahead of Eubank in all the governing bodies, I think, in the terms of the rankings. Who cares? They need each other. On a 50-50 split, I believe this fight happens like that. So for us, we have options. We understand they're not as lucrative as the Eubank fight, but we can beat Barrios. Conor Benn can beat Barrios in London and become WBC welterweight world championship. Chris Eubank can fight a 42-year-old Lara in front of about 800 people. And by the way, Lara wins every round. Now that's great business, isn't it? So everybody, give yourself a slap round the chops and let's make it happen. Biggest fight in British boxing right now that can be made as of today. But if we can make the Barrios fight, it's over to Conor Benn. My advice would be to do the Eubank fight because it's massive money. And you set up yourself and once you smash him to pieces, then you can fight Barrios. But the weight makes it a dangerous fight. The weight makes it a 50-50 fight. When you're talking about negotiations and percentages, don't forget, Conor Benn is coming up 2 divisions to fight Chris Eubank. Chris Eubank's fighting at his natural weight. We're at a slight disadvantage, but we don't care because we're up for a tear-up. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of days, but there it is, 50-50, fight's made.